You know what really pisses me off? It's that Blizzard lets people test on the PTR. Yeah, they're testing mythic encounters on the PTR prior to it coming out. To me, that's cheating. It's cheating in my book to go around and claim that world first bullshit. It's like having the answers to a math test on the paper before you even start it. It's not legit. Regardless of how much time guilds spend testing these strats, testing encounters, it's a head start on the so-called world first bullshit. They should do in-house testing with like the 500 people they've got working there, and then we can see who's truly world first. You know what I mean? Okay, let's talk about the PTR, because I should have done this a while ago. I made a video about N'Zoth PTR where we put in some complaints about how Blizzard was treating us. And a lot of feedback to that was that it's the PTR. It's supposed to be like that, right? Bugs on the PTR are a very normal thing. You guys are basically assholes for complaining about this, which had a weird response. That was the public response in comments and whatever. Yet, at the same time, I got bombarded over the next couple of days from raiders from a whole variety of guilds saying, do people really believe this? Is that what they think is happening here? And the answer is yes. The answer is yes. Although I made that memey intro, the fact of the matter is, a lot of people have never raid tested on the PTR. Therefore, they don't really understand what it is. But they may have been on the PTR, or they have an idea of what's happening on the PTR. Now, the thing about this video is that the likelihood is the people I would really like to sit down and talk to about these things and have a discussion with are not the ones who are going to listen to it. Over the years of doing this job, one thing I've learned is that the people who really need to hear things and have their misinformation corrected are generally the ones who want to listen the least. They like to stick to their opinion, and that's it. Now, we've all encountered people like that before, but the point of this video is to arm you, my viewers, who end up in conversations with these guys, which I see all over the place, especially as the World First race is coming up and this conversation is likely to crop up a lot, is with the proper information in order to talk to these people about it, if you choose to engage. Because I do see people try and engage with these guys, but usually they've not raid tested either. In fact, raid testing participation on the PTR, I would say, is at an all-time low, and getting lower by the day. In fact, they had PTR raid testing of a mythic raid boss this Friday, which garnered a grand total of no feedback. Nobody bothered to test it, pretty much. A couple of guilds did, but realistically, no one bothered to test it. Why? It's not worth our time. How can it be, then, that something that, in many people's eyes, is a big advantage, gives you a big head start, is considered to be not worth the time of the players? Well, that's where the reality of PTR raid testing comes into light. Let's talk about the positives. What is the benefit to both sides? To Blizzard and to the raiders, all right? So Blizzard needs to put these bosses into the hands of players who are creative, imaginative, geared, and skilled and organized, right? They need to put these bosses in front of those players. Now, you might say, surely Blizzard has people internally who are capable of doing that. Unlikely. Really unlikely. And this is going to be a big, hard fact for some people, but it is a fact statistically. World of Warcraft, certainly at the Mythic raid level, is the hardest MMORPG on the market by a long, long way. An actually crazy way. In fact, I've personally stated many times, I believe Mythic right now is too hard. It's very inaccessible for many people, not due to time constraints, down to the ability needed in order to accomplish it. They're extremely complex. And we see people farming it for months and months and barely making progress at this point. And obviously, right now in MMO Champion, there's a huge thread about how hard Mythic raiding is. And I agree. As much as it would be a negative impact on myself, not only from my own personal raiding, because I'm fine with the current content, yet I have over a decade's worth of experience in playing these encounters. They gradually increased in difficulty, so I've gone along with the learning curve. At the same time, also affects me professionally in terms of casting things, doing that kind of work, and making content and teaching people. If fights get easier, then that's less relevant to my whole user base. Perhaps, because maybe it's more accessible then, and more people are willing to learn if they believe they can actually overcome these challenges. But yet most people, I do believe a lot of players, truly deep down, don't think they've got what it takes. And certainly if I've seen so many trials over the guilds I've been in over the years, countless trials, I mean really countless trials, well into the hundreds, who have joined a Mythic raiding guild for the first time, coming from Heroic, where they were easily farming whatever, and then coming into Mythic and just being like, I can't do this. I literally can't do this, and had to leave. And it's a real shame when you see that happen, because you're like, still a video game. Sure, we play at the top end, but still a video game, and these guys are obviously not shit. Yet, when it comes to the harder Mythic bosses, they're just completely outmatched and outskilled, and they generally leave after a little while because they're like, I just can't do it. I'm making mistakes left and right. It's too much pressure. I can't do it. That means that right now, because we have this such high difficulty of Mythic raiding, is that the teams that are assembled globally in order to tackle these challenges are made from the creme de la creme of the WoW player base. They really are. And I'm not talking about the top 10. We have this weird thing that occurs on forums all the time, where if you're not in, say, a top 10 or top 5 guild, then you're irrelevant, which is ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. There are many hundreds of guilds who do manage to clear the Mythic content, and they are in the 0.00001% ability level of people playing this game. It's a simple fact. Blizzard can't possibly assemble a good statistical representation of that internally. There's just no way. Even though they make the game, there's just no way they can do that. So they need to throw players at it to see exactly what happens when players get in there who use every tool and understand the mechanics of this game, down to ridiculous number strategies to figure out what they're going to do with it. Are they going to do something crazy with it? Have they seen something we didn't see even while designing the boss? Not only that, and more importantly, it's really important to Blizzard that they don't release bosses that are broken. Prior to raid PTR testing existing, there were lots of bosses that were broken for everybody because they hadn't been able to be widespread tested, and therefore people just ended up stuck. So the people actually complaining about PTR testing are missing one important fact. The fact is, if you're getting good quality bosses that are working fine, that's down mainly to the raid testers who are putting in the work to find out the broken side of it, what isn't working, what should be changed, what is unfun. All these elements are down to the raid testers who go and check this stuff out. That is the advantage there. Let's talk about the advantage to us then. Why do we do it? And if it's so good, like we said, why is the participation getting lower and lower? The advantage to us is basically one thing, like as a practical advantage, and that is figuring out what classes are likely to be relevant when this content goes live. That's pretty much it. For people who are looking to raid a really elite edge and want to do that and enjoy doing that, figuring out what compositions, what classes to prepare, all that kind of stuff is great information to have. And doing that can only be done by going in and testing it out yourself and coming away saying, we think Blood DK is going to be strong here. We think Shadow Priests are going to be strong here. We think Hunters are going to be good here. We think Rogues are going to be good here. What healers do we want? Well, Shamans are looking really good with the with the changes in this patch, right? Whichever patch it might be. And love figuring all these things out. And therefore, we can come away and start preparing those classes for when the new raid tier comes, so our team's as strong as it can be, and so we can go in and actually kill the bosses, because that's what we enjoy, and we like playing at that level of the game. We also filter that information out to the rest of the player base, and people can decide what to do with that information. Obviously, if you're in Heroic or a mid-level clearing Mythic guild, it's less relevant to you, but for a lot of people, they like to play the strongest class, right? That's not strange, that's not weird, and that information then disseminates throughout the player base, similar to people following the MDI. I want to play this class now because it had heavy MDI representation. What's killing it in PvP now? I look to the top guys, and then that filters down through the player base, which has its drawbacks, I will admit. Now, let's talk about personal reasons. Let's talk about personal reasons. Let's tackle the biggest thing ever. It's bullshit that the top guilds get to do all the raid testing. Firstly, PTR is open and free to everybody. There's absolutely no requirements. There's nothing levied on anybody to not take part. Everybody from a normal guild to a few pugs, that happens all the time in the PTR, is people pugging people to get some testing done, happens all the time. It's not exclusive in any way, shape, or form. It's not exclusive. The reason that heavily favors top-end guilds doing this, they're the ones who have the free schedules from live in order to go testing. Because they've already cleared all the content that long ago, usually before the PTR goes live. And not only that, they can reschedule the live raid. So let's say you're a 2-day raiding guild. If you raid, say, Wednesday, Thursday, and raid testing is on Thursday, they can clear everything on a Wednesday, and then they're free to do that other scheduled raid day on the PTR. Similarly, with any other guild, if you have the ability to clear and get all the gear you want in one evening, then that leaves you with extra evenings that are typically scheduled for normal raiding, and therefore you can go and assess it. Some people seem to believe that buried deep down in the other guilds, there is some really elite team that literally doesn't get anywhere because of PTR testing. No. That's just not true. And we can see that statistically. Really elite teams will clear within the first couple of weeks. The likelihood is they absolutely do not need PTR testing in any way, shape, or form, and I'll get to that in a second. And if they're really that good, it wouldn't matter anyway. It's as simple as that. If they were better than everybody else in the world, then they would clear in a reasonable amount of time regardless, and they know that as well. It's almost like standing up and shouting for somebody who really doesn't want you to do that. What there isn't is some sort of World 1000 guild that can only raid for an hour a week that would definitely be world first if they were given some sort of PTR opportunity. No. Realistically, a lot of it comes down to time. If, and I fully agree with this, if every guild, or many more guilds, had the ability to day raid for 1 or 2 resets, which is what we see the top guilds doing, maybe, probably, this landscape of the world first list would change. I say maybe, because the chances are, what I tend to found over the last decade is that the people who really want this, are fired up for it, enthusiastic for it, they're the ones that gravitate towards this, and because they are so into their hobby, they even in North America, as I've spent time with the North American guilds, they still manage to do this, is trying to organize their schedule so they can get this period of time available. Now, not everybody can do that. I had a good talk with the guys from Aversion, a very, very high top-end guild, and their guys are not able to raid for more than like 1 reset. They struggle with that kind of thing, as many guilds do. My guild struggles with that. I'm unable to day raid at this point. What there are is tremendously high quality, no doubt better than what you see in the top world guilds, out and about in lower guilds. 100%. I've played with them. They absolutely exist. Entire raid teams, though, that's where it gets ropey. That's where the grey area comes in. Are there these scattered about absolute god mode gamers? Yes. Yes, there are. Are there entire raid teams like that that aren't represented, and this is the important thing, that aren't represented in like the top WoW Progress results or the rated.io results, whichever one you use? No, not really. If they're really, really good, they're still going to get a high score. Like similar to my guild is a 3-day raiding guild. We don't raid any time outside of that. We don't extend or anything like that, and we still get world 40th and whatever, right? That's the guys that do that. Just 3 days, which is not rare for a WoW guild. They do well. We do well doing that, as do other guilds in a similar scenario. We tend to clear maybe a week, 2 weeks after the world first guys. And then we're done. Right? So that's the kind of scenario that's more realistic. Okay. What's the disadvantage? Why is participation lower? Why is this happening? It's in the eyes of many, it's such a big advantage. So why is it why are people just not doing it anymore? Why are less guilds doing it, even though they can do it? And this is the important thing. They can do it. One, obviously the player base has gotten smaller. Unquestionably. The player base is much smaller. I've PTR raid tested since the Burning Crusade. If I think to Ulduar, the sky was so full of players that it literally blotted out the sun. Like, there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of players in the skies outside Ulduar because there were so many people playing the game. Well, that's not the only reason. That's part of the reason, for sure. The other reason is times have changed. Twitch streams exist. There are far more people making content on the PTR. And more importantly, really good players can figure out everything they need to know from videos. They don't need to be there. They don't need to put their raiders through raid testing. Because shock horror, not a lot of people like raid testing. I do. I do. The only disadvantage I have, which I've stated in the past, is that I like to see the boss fresh and go in as blind as possible. I prefer that to be on live, 100%. I prefer that to be on live and know nothing about the bosses and see it fresh for the first time. But I'm okay with it being on the PTR. I prefer it to be live, but I'm okay with it being on the PTR. The other side of it that I do enjoy, and I cannot deny I do enjoy it, is it's fresh new content. And I love raiding in World of Warcraft. So for me, I don't mind PTR testing because we're raiding something new. We're figuring out the puzzle. We're figuring out the strats. Obviously, we're facing new bosses. No strategy guide exists. We're the ones writing the strategy guides, certainly in the eyes of the Fat Boss guys and things like that. That aspect of it is so fun. And everybody throwing ideas around, figuring it out, trying to throw ideas into the mix, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work. Having raid leaders like Alex say, okay, has anybody got more ideas we want to throw at this? That's super fun. It's so enjoyable. And when you're with a group of people who love raiding, That's such an atmosphere that you can't get anywhere else. So from that perspective, I love PTR raid testing. I think it's really fun. But from the other perspective is, I've seen the inside of Neolothra already. I can't deny that. I have spent time in there. So what about the time advantage? Well, as I just said, good guilds don't really need to be there to get that advantage. They don't. They can get all the information they need from watching videos and from the feedback that come from other people's videos and all the commentary. And everybody's trying to get those views. So, of course, everybody's chipping their hat in. And usually it's very, very similar. And from there, they don't need to do it. So technically, yes, I have... I think something like 22 hours already in the Neolothra raid. If I think about all the heroic testing we did and the mythic testing, I have about 22 hours in that raid. That's huge, right? That's huge. However, here's the important thing. However, that's 1 hour per boss on bosses that change pretty dramatically for the most part, including the trash, and including the fact that bosses are changed on the fly. And we know, because we see this happen, is that bosses have already changed, several of them, quite a lot since we actually did the testing on them, based on the testing we did. In some cases, they've entirely swapped mechanics in and out, or dropped mechanics. What I'm saying is, the bosses that I have these 20 hours with aren't necessarily the bosses that are going to come to live. They're not. And they do make us test the trash. So that 1 hour is often more a case of 40 minutes. Sometimes if they've got all the information they want, or something is drastically broken, then they only give us half an hour. Right? They'll turn the boss off early. If something's really broken, they might extend it a little bit. So it swings and roundabouts as to what you get. But the point of the matter is, it's really important that we get that information and test these bosses out for everybody else. We get our little bit of the cake, which we could get elsewhere. We could absolutely get it elsewhere, because somebody will be raid testing it, somebody will be streaming it, somebody will be doing something. But we do have fun doing it, but we're often not facing the bosses that you'll face on live. More importantly than that, we do not get to test the last boss. What most people would consider the most important, right? And also, it's 1 hour per boss. I should have said this earlier. It's 1 hour per boss. That's not a lot of time for most guilds to make up, considering they're going in with a known strategy where we went in with nothing. There is a vast difference with going in having no idea what this boss does, and going in having watched multiple videos, having a better comp because you watched those videos, and being ready with a strategy in mind. A big, big difference between going in having no idea what's going to happen and then trying to work it out within that 1 hour period, all right? So that 1 hour isn't some sort of static block. Those 1 hours are completely different. On the one hand, the testers go in with no knowledge, a bit of dungeon journal, and then have to figure out a strategy based on there, maybe swapping classes in and out, swapping in extra tanks, things like that, in order to try it out, versus the 1 hour that other guilds get, which goes in with a known strategy, a known comp setup, and more than ready to know the position that the boss needs to be in, where the raid needs to be, how things need to be dealt with and tackled. A vast, vast difference. So that 1 hour isn't just black and white. That 20 hours isn't like, well, it's 20 hours for you versus 20 hours for someone else. Absolutely not, because that 20 hours we do is condensed dramatically into what the other guys do. So going back to it, we also do not get to test the final bosses on Mythic, which does lead to a lot of problems. Obviously, you guys are probably aware of Kill Jaden. Near enough every single last boss, including Ashara, as you remember, there was nerfs ongoing during that fight during the last World First race, gets some kind of changes because those bosses are untested. And that's what happens. So when I see a lot of people, when bosses get nerfed or changed like Ashara did in the last one as the recent example, when things like that happen and people are outraged, it's like, oh, this is limits favoritism, this is methods favoritism, all this kind of shit. No. It's the fact that the boss didn't get tested, and therefore they should have known earlier on that mechanic X doesn't really work as it's supposed to be. That's not how we intended this fight to work, right? That's not how it was going to be. And this is why we end up with Kill Jadens of the world, Fallen Avatars of the world, that need multiple rounds of nerfs in order to get to the place that they intended it to be. And also nerfs that then come in order to allow more guilds through the door. Because one thing you've got to remember here is Blizzard doesn't want their content cleared in one reset. They don't want that. It's possible for the elite of the elite of the elite to do that. But it's not what they want, because community perception. What happens is a lot of backseat gamers will then go, the raid is super easy. It died in 4 days. Emerald Nightmare, right? Whereas all the other mythic guilds, which clear all the content each tier, well before the next tier comes, they might be in there for 2 or 3 months. Yet what you've got is Captain LFR, Captain Normal, telling everybody else that the game is really easy. And Blizzard is fully aware of that. They're fully aware that these guys go out there who have no understanding, for the most part, of what's happening. no understanding of why the raid was cleared so quickly, telling everybody else. And you know how word of mouth works. They tell 10 friends, they tell 10 friends, and it spreads like wildfire that suddenly World of Warcraft's the easiest game in the world, which is why we probably still have the commentary that World of Warcraft is very easy, despite with Mythic Plus and with raiding, it's the hardest game out there. Like, it's extremely difficult in an MMORPG space. So, generally the bosses are tuned extremely hard. Almost unkillable. That's why this tier alone, we've seen things, this expansion, we've seen bosses like Unat with like the most pulls ever. 700 plus pulls in order to defeat these bosses, leading to these scenarios where we just had no idea what we're going into. We didn't get to test it. We walk into an absolute clusterfuck, which is what happened in Crucible of Storms, where Blizzard's saying, hey, it's about this level of difficulty. We walk in, okay, you've made the hardest encounter of all time. Okay? So those are the kind of things that happen without testing. Testing is a vital part, and I hope participation picks up because it is super fun. But ultimately, the whole purpose of this is that it's a symbiotic relationship between the players and Blizzard. Blizzard needs people to test this stuff, otherwise we end up with like the Burning Crusade situation where we had Cerbishrite Cavern, which was completely full of broken bosses and was an absolute nightmare. Magtheridon was the same, just an absolute shit show that nobody could get past and affected the Mythic Raiders, the Heroic Raiders, the Normal Raiders. Affects absolutely everybody down the line. At the same time, we get a little bit of fun out of it, and we get a little bit of information which disseminates to you. So ultimately, raid testing is a win-win. Is raid testing an enormous advantage? Absolutely not. It would be if nobody did it, and you were the only guild to do it, and you kept that information quiet. If you did that, sure, raid testing is a big, big advantage. But that's not the case. It probably never will be the case, at least I hope it's not. And therefore, it's a good thing all round. And this idea that you get this huge advantage, as we just showed with the time condensation of information, just isn't true. So I hope that helps you out on that. I will touch on why were we so pissed. And this is like the bad side of it. There is a dark side to testing. Is that Blizzard is... Look, I like Blizzard. I've got a good relationship with Blizzard now, I believe. But they can be very arrogant at times. Or perhaps it comes across as arrogance, whereas it's more wisdom. In that they don't like engaging. Because one thing, a really dark side of raiding, certainly the higher you go, and certainly when it's somewhere in the PTR, and this is absolutely true, is that you deal with a lot of people who have a very short fuse. And when something's not going right, I can tell you that general chat on the PTR is awful. It's absolutely awful. Like, it's really grim. To see the reaction of a lot of these players, because these guys are really, really hardcore, right? Some of them are pretty much basement dwellers. Not everybody, but it gets really intense, and we've seen guilds banned for spamming the PTR forums and things like that when things go wrong. However, the frustration comes from this. PTR testing is never really It's not given enough notice. So with experience, you kind of know when PTR testing is coming. When the first post goes up that we're going to have PTR testing, it goes up on a Tuesday to tell you raid testing is on like a Thursday and a Friday. Now, as I said there, you are dealing with a lot of basement dwellers. That's absolutely the case, but not everybody. In fact, at least depending on your guild, it's different from guild to guild. I can talk about my guild, is many of my guild, which are older players, have plans. They have plans. They have things they're doing with family and friends at weekend. And that creates a lot of problems when it's like, okay, you need to cancel your plans on a Friday, because our guild does have a PTR requirement. Like, it's a part of the guild to do PTR, so everybody agrees to that when they join. It's like, okay, we're going to PTR test. Yeah, you do have to cancel social plans in order to do it. So there are a lot of players who are doing that. They're cancelling time out with friends. They're cancelling times out with family so they can take part in this. And it's only for a short period of time, so it's not like, oh my god, giving away your life. No, it lasts, like a month or something like that. And then from there, you kind of already know there's going to be testing next Friday, because once they start, they tend to roll it through for at least a month. So you kind of get the preemptive, so it doesn't happen all the time. But let's say you are one of those players who has cancelled plans to be there on a Friday, or you're simply a player who just doesn't enjoy PTR testing, because, like I just said, it's often a buggy mess. That happens all the time. You're dealing with just flat-out broken bosses. And Blizzard don't talk to you when they give you a broken boss. Now, a broken boss is okay. We expect that. It's the PTR. We're there to find out if the boss is broken, right? So if we get going in the fight and something isn't working correctly, or something's doing something weird, that's the feedback we get. Blizzard's observing that. That's fine. There's a big difference between that and a boss that's literally upside down. There's a big difference between that and the portal that takes you to the raid test being under the floor, right? These are the things that any QA control at all, or just before raid testing starts, because they schedule it. They know when raid testing starts, should be checked before they let players inside. Is the boss the right way up? Does the teleporter take you to the boss? These are things that are like, okay, I'm just going to check the teleporter works. Click, yeah, it works. Click, no, it doesn't work. Okay, we need to move that. These are things that are respectful of people's time that you've invited that have cancelled plans in order to be there. This isn't the same as the boss is stuck in phase 1. This isn't the same as the boss doesn't transition or it doesn't do certain things that it's supposed to do. It's very, very different. These are things that are really inconsiderate and disrespectful of people's time, because people are there for 1 hour only on a Friday night, and if you're in the EU, it's relatively late. It can go until like 1 AM if they're testing multiple bosses. And you walk in there and the boss just doesn't work. And it can often take 20 to 30 minutes to fix that, but they don't communicate to you. So when we get a boss like, I don't know the names of the new bosses, but the boss that was one-shotting the whole raid within 2 seconds of starting the fight and just eliminating everybody, that's something that can be checked in the design process. But the problem is, as I said earlier, they don't really have the skill level to tackle these bosses appropriately. So we do know, and they have confirmed, they often try bosses with, like, God mode on. Is the boss casting stuff? Yeah, okay, right? Is it doing stuff? They do stuff like that. But when we get in there and it's just killing the whole raid, and they don't say, hold on, we're fixing this, I'll send a server message out, which you guys have seen anytime you played WoW, that's really frustrating because it can take 25, 30 minutes. And then what happens in those occasions is they just switch the boss off after about half an hour. So because you don't have information and they're not communicating, it's because they recognize it's happening straight away, right? There's no way they don't know immediately that this is a problem. They don't say anything. Then 25 minutes later, the boss just vanishes. And then you will get a forum post, which is like, hey, we're putting up a different boss. That's really disrespectful of people's time. And it's understandable that people get really frustrated with that, because this is something that can be checked well before you're inviting players in to try this stuff out. Certainly in regards to teleporters and bosses being the right way around, things like that should be checked beforehand. Now, I'm fully aware that this might have happened because they switched the instance on and they couldn't have prepared for it. That's fine. The issue is we don't get any communication at all. We get no communication, no feedback. And it's often, at least, once something like this happens, as somebody who's done raid testing a lot, you know you're going to be there for 20, 25 minutes before something happens, but you don't know it. So what you end up doing is just constantly trying it and dying, running, try for like 20, 25 minutes, because you don't know when they're going to fix it. They could fix it in 5 minutes. They might fix it in 10. But there's no feedback to do that. So players do get frustrated because like, I cancelled plans with my family to be here for this. You can at least check the bosses the right way around, right? There's that bit of comeback, and I don't think that's strange at all. The issue is, of course, a lot of people compare it to the normal PTR, which people have a lot more experience with. So if you're testing something like the 8.3 visions, which are just up all the time, you can log in at your leisure whenever you feel like it. People compare it to that, but raid testing is not like that. It's really different. Raid testing is at a very set time. For 1 hour. Like, you have to organize everybody to be on this PTR realm, have downloaded it, modified it, got it ready to go at a very specific time on one day of the week, and you only have the hour to be there. So you have this just block to be there. It's not like normal raid testing or normal PTR testing where the content, I can log on to 8.3 and play through 8.3 right now. I can't raid test, right? I can't do that. So that's the big difference and why people get pissy with it. And why people, it's not the same as normal PTR testing and normal bugs you encounter in a PTR. There's a big difference between, I logged in this morning, I had some free time, I went and tested out Uldum, and one of the rares isn't working, and it wiped me instantly. One of the rares is killing me straight away. It's not the same as that. This is like, you have to be there on a Friday at 10 PM for 1 hour. Go. And that's what happens. The server comes up, go. All right, we're turning it off now. Right? That's how it works. And you get in there and you can't do anything for half an hour. That's a drag. Big drag. All right. I hope that helps you out, guys. PTR testing is very important. So let's hope it grows. We need more people there. Thank you very much for listening. Bye-bye.